Hello boys and girls, thanks for joining with me as we continue Jotham's journey, his adventure to the first Christmas. We're in Advent week 3, this is chapter 7, called Searching. My friend, the man in the dirty tunic said, can I interest you in a bit of baklava? Jotham looked at Ishtar, who then looked at the pastry the man held out. Ishtar gave a slight shake of the head, but Jotham said, no thank you. They pushed on through the crowd, trying to look into every crack and alley for a sign of Jotham's father. You're missing a rare delicacy, the man in the tunic yelled after them. The two boys ignored him, knowing the unwritten rules of haggling did not require them to respond. Jerusalem was so big. Jotham couldn't imagine why all these people would want to live together, shoulder to shoulder, crammed in like a flock of sheep. The air was foul with the smell of manure and sweat, and red-faced men pulled camels and goats and donkeys through the narrow, winding streets. But for all of that, Jotham found Jerusalem fascinating. You could buy just about anything you could ever want, he decided, if you had the money, of course. And there were more kinds of people moving about than Jotham even knew existed. White-faced men, black-faced men, red-faced, women with veils, women with funny feathered hats. But the thing that sent a tingle through Jotham's chest every time he saw it was the soaring tower of the temple that overshadowed the entire city. Everywhere they went, in the market, up an alley, behind the stables, Jotham could always look up and see at least part of the temple overhead. Is that him? Ishtar said, pointing to a middle-aged man with a beard. Jotham's heart skipped a beat as he searched out the face Ishtar pointed to, then he sighed as he said no, but a very close likeness. They continued searching, Jotham driven by hope and Ishtar driven by a desire to see his friend happy again. Ishtar could only guess what Jotham's family looked like, but still 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. What is baklava? Jotham asked. Oh, it's a sweet, flaky pastry full of honey and nuts. It's the best of my people. So why didn't we get some? Because the baklava the man offered was like camel dung compared to real baklava. Besides, Ishtar said, we didn't have any money. Jotham shrugged and went back to inspecting the faces in the crowd. Simeon, he knew, was searching another part of the city. With only a description of Jotham's family, it would be difficult. But Jotham was confident that if his family was to be found, Simeon could find them. The 2 boys enjoyed their time with Simeon. When Jotham had told him of his many adventures and about all he'd learned of the coming of the Messiah, Simeon got so excited the boys were afraid the angel of death would come to him early. But he finally calmed down, and they talked late into the night about the Messiah. Jotham made Simeon tell the story of the Holy Spirit's visit over and over again. And Simeon kept saying, and you are sure that Ishtar's father was following a rising star? Then a few moments later he'd say, and are you sure that Nathan said the time is close? Jotham would nod his head rapidly each time and say, yes, 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 I'm sure. Ishtar, look! Ishtar raised his head to look where Jotham was pointing. Over the top of the city wall they could see a huge caravan descending from the wilderness of Judea to the Kidron Valley, which separated it from Jerusalem. It's my father! Ishtar yelled. Together the boys ran out the Lion's Gate in the city wall and met up with the caravan just as it reached the bottom of the valley. Father! Ishtar cried when he saw him. The 2 hugged for a long time, then Ishtar had much explaining to do. It made Jotham feel even more sad that he couldn't find his own father in all of Jerusalem. When the servant of Simeon rode to our camp and told me you were alive, it was as if you were born again, Salamar said. He told how the entire caravan, even the women, had searched every rock and bush in the desert, and how he had sent for Nathan to help them search. Then he looked up to the Mount of Olives and marveled that the boys had come so far through the tunnels. Just then Simeon walked up and Jotham introduced him to Salamar. I am in your debt for caring for my son. May your God favor you richly with your kindness, for your kindness. Simeon reported finding no trace of Jotham's family. Then Salamar said, Jotham, you're welcome to stay with our caravan if you'd like. We'll camp here tonight. My brothers and I decided to speak with your king. Surely he will know where the babes to be born. Jotham was amazed that Ishtar's father was actually going to visit King Herod. He'd never before known anyone who could just walk in and see a king. Simeon, who was now responsible for Jotham, said Jotham could stay with the caravan or at Simeon's house, whichever Jotham desired. Then Jotham asked if Ishtar could help him search the city some more. "No, that won't be possible," Salamar said. "His place is at my side as I visit your king." Jotham thanked everyone and said he would stay with the caravan that night and then with Simeon after it left. He walked with Ishtar and his father and uncles as far as the Lion's Gate. Then he set out on his own search. The only place he hadn't looked, he decided finally, was in the temple itself. He had never been to the temple and wasn't sure how to act if he went there. But 5 minutes later, he found himself climbing the white marble stairs that led up a short hill to the Temple Mount. Once on top, Jotham's eyes grew wide. Surely this is heaven, he thought. Before him was a courtyard big enough to hold 10 flocks of sheep, and it was made entirely of white and blue marble that reflected the bright sunlight into Jotham's eyes. Around the entire court stood rows and rows of white columns, a narrow beam connecting them all together like some unfinished roof. To the right, between the columns, Jotham could see the Mount of Olives on the other side of the Kidron Valley. The whole hillside was tiled with white grave markers and tombs. Far below in the green of the valley, Ishtar's caravan camped along the creek. Then Jotham looked between the columns to his left and saw all of Jerusalem spread out below. The city wall, as high as 5 camels, cut a jagged course around the city. Narrow streets wound around the buildings of clay and stone, and Jotham could now see the market where the man had offered him the baklava. On the other side of the city, against the opposite wall, he saw 3 towers and the palace of Herod. Jotham stood for a long time trying to take in every detail of this great city. Then he turned his attention to the temple in front of him. White stone rose out of the marble to tower over his head. 4 great columns stood guard over the entrance to the temple itself. It seemed that everything he saw was decorated with designs of gold, reminding him of flowers and seashells. Another short wall separated Jotham from the temple. He asked a man if he could go inside. The man looked at Jotham, dressed now in a blue tunic given him by Simeon, and said, "Of course, but you must stay in the court of women." The man didn't need to tell Jotham this because he had not yet reached the age of 13. Jotham walked up another set of marble stairs and through a small gate in the wall. He came out the other side of the gate and looked up to see the temple reaching for the sun over his head. It seemed to be higher than the clouds, and Jotham wondered how mortal men had ever built such a beautiful thing. He was now in the court of women, and he knew he could not pass through the gate in the final wall that protected the temple, at least not until he was 13. But even here there were hundreds of women and children, even some men bringing sacrifices or praying or just standing around talking. Along one side of the wall were wooden tables set up with weights and measures. Men at the tables sold lambs and birds and grain for sacrifices. It seemed kind of strange, Jotham thought, to see men selling things inside such a holy place. Jotham wandered among all the people looking for any signs of his mother or sisters. A woman so old that Jotham thought she should surely be dead sat against a column and she was praying. Every once in a while she would shout something out and the people around her would laugh, and one woman even cursed her. For what little was left of the afternoon, Jotham continued searching through the court of women. When he had gone around the entire temple, he decided it was time to go back to the caravan. He was headed toward the gate leading out of the court of women when he felt a tug on his tunic. He looked down to see the crazy old woman the others had been making fun of, and she was pulling on his clothing. "Boy," she croaked, her old lips barely able to form the words, "the Messiah is coming." And this was no surprise to Jotham, so he simply said, "Yes, I know." The look of shock on the old woman's face, which was so thin she looked clear, made Jotham think that he had killed her for good. She looked at him for a long time as if she could see inside his head and know what he was thinking. Then she got a strange and distant look on her face. She pulled him close until his face was mere inches from her own. "I am Anna, daughter of Phanuel," she said softly, and Jotham wondered if that should mean something. "And I tell you, the one you seek you will find in Bethlehem." Each of us spends our lives searching. We're all searching for the same thing. Although we do it in many different ways. We go to extreme lengths to find out what we're looking for, and many times we hurt others in the process as we search. The thing we search for is not a person or an animal, not even a god necessarily. The thing we search for is the most important thing in all our lives. Without it, we don't care to live. In fact, when people think they haven't found it, they become really, really sad. Without this thing, there's a hole in our chest the size of a watermelon. It makes us act in selfish ways and treat other people badly and always want to get our own way. We try to fill this hole with popularity or power or self-praise, but nothing is ever good enough to take away the pain of that empty space in our hearts. What is this thing that each of us searches for to the exclusion of all else? It's simply to be assured that somebody loves us. The knowledge, the belief that someone somewhere thinks we are important. The truth is, no matter who we are or what we've done, there is one who loves us more than anyone else ever could or would. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so, says the old hymn. The problem is most of us don't really believe it. We think we need people to love us in order to be of any value. So sometimes if we do something we think is great but nobody compliments us, we feel badly. Or if someone else seems to be the center of attention, we get upset. Or if our friends pay attention to someone else, we get mad. Yes, each of us is searching for exactly the same thing. Someone to tell us we're pretty or handsome enough, someone to tell us we're good enough, someone to tell us we're loved. But the secret of Christmas is simply this: you'll find the one you search for at Bethlehem.